Well, welcome everyone to Impolite Company on the GCPR.live network, the show where we do what the common phrase is that they say that you're not supposed to do. We talk about religion and politics, and we do it in a healthy way. That's the key thing. I'm your host, Matthew Best. Together, we walk through honest dialogue, explore messy truths, and try to see the humanity and perspectives different from our own. And if you've got a thought or a question or something to challenge, you can email me at contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I can speak today. And just search for Impolite Company and look for our logo. And if you want to dive deeper into some of the themes that we explore here, you can visit my blog at pastormatthewbest.com. And we, of course, always appreciate any support that you have for the show. Anything that you would offer would go turn right back into the show. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Impolite Company. A little bit later, I'll highlight a couple of the things that I love to talk about, but we're going to get into today's conversation. And today, I'm really happy to invite April Ossmann, who is the author of We Poems, which was published by Red Hen Press in 2025 this year, which takes a spiritual stance to bridging politicized divides, exploring conscious and unconscious prejudices with lyricism, warmth, and self-implicating humor. How we shape our nation with perceptions, how to change to heal families, friendships, and country of incivility and villainization by practicing greater compassion by seeing past egos to souls. So, April, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Matthew, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So, you are a poet, and I always, when I have an opportunity to talk with people who write or are creative in this, I always like to start off by asking, what got you into poetry? What drew you to it? And especially to want to start to write poetry. I think that's really kind of important to kind of set a foundation.
Yeah. Well, I wrote my first poem when I was 7. And I think it was from reading poems that were within fairy tales, because fairy tales are the first thing other than nursery rhymes that I remember reading. Um, and I started writing poetry regularly when I was 10, when I discovered Robert Frost. The class I had, we studied Robert Frost, and they had a little series of autobiographies, or not biographies for kids of famous people. And they had one of Robert Frost, and after reading, his poetry, I loved it so much I read the biography, and I decided I was going to be a poet and move to Vermont. Robert Frost was born in California like I was, and he
Hmm.
moved to Vermont and other New England states. And so that's sort of where that inspiration came. I just loved his poetry so much, and I love poetry so much. So,
Oh, there you go. That's great.
yeah.
Good. It's always interesting to hear the inspiration behind, especially writing projects and whatnot. I think it gives a lot of background for folks. So before we get into specific poems, I want to ask you about the title. So
Yeah.
the title is We.
Yeah.
And so the obvious question is, who is we, and how do you hope readers will hear that word as they move through the book and read the poems?
We the people, and we all of us, in the sense of Walt Whitman. The title, there are kind of two title poems, but the main title poem is called We, and it's in conversation with Walt Whitman's famous poem Song of Myself. And it quotes some of his lines and phrases, and I sort of do my own thing with it. And so I love this idea of, you know we, everyone, all of us, red, blue, black, white, every stripe, right? And that poem sort of goes into that. And, you know, I, I'd like to see us recover a sense of that as a country, as a nation where, you may disagree on policy with people, but you don't have to hate them. or have
Yeah.
rage at them. Like,
Yeah, that's been a challenge
yeah,
for a lot. You know, like we have the aspirational side of our country, which it really very much embodies what you're talking about. And then there's been some realities that, there's been division in us and them, and all of this kind of tension
yeah.
back and forth between the aspiration and some of our history. So I'm wondering, how do you see poetry functioning in that kind of divide, and especially in this current moment? What do you see as the place of poetry in that? What can it offer?
Yeah, I think poetry and art in general is a place where maybe we can kind of set politics aside a little bit. Um, and art is something that think speaks kind of directly to the heart or to the soul. And so, hopefully that can kind of, avoid some of the automatic responses, to the other side. And, poetry speaks very much through metaphor, which is, I think to me that's the wiser part of us, right? Like, there's the front part of your brain that, thinks it's smart and thinks it's in charge. And
Right,
and
right.
when I'm writing, I feel like there are two contributions that my brain is making as I write. That part of the brain that thinks it's in charge of writing the poem, and then there's an unconscious contribution that happens that I'm not even aware of until later when I read and reread the poem and revise it. And I think that unconscious part of the brain is the wiser part of the brain, and it's
Mm,
trying to teach the smarty pants part, like the answer to the things I struggle with and the truths I want to discover and meaning and all that. And I think that part of the brain thinks in metaphor.
mm.
Um, and so, my hope is that poetry, will be that same kind of communication to other people. Like, whatever wisdom is coming from my unconscious through metaphor, hopefully it can bridge some divides because, you're not preaching at someone. It's art. You're painting a picture, you're making music. Um,
Yeah, and would you say, I know I've heard this regarding especially like novels or other type of literature, where each time you read it, you get a different, you're reading something different, even though you're reading the same thing. You're something else is happening, and part of that I know has been because, like, when I go back and I reread something, I'm different. I have changed, and even though the words are the same, it's different now. And I'm just wondering, have you encountered that with poetry, or have people that have read some of your work, have they mentioned that of, hey, first time I read this poem, here's what was going on. Now when I read it again, it's like something different.
I don't know if someone has mentioned that to me, but certainly, in talking with other people about poetry in general, other people's poetry, people have talked about that. And I've noticed that, about myself too, in reading other poets' poetry and even in rereading my own. You know, a lot of what I write is what I'm struggling with, whatever that is at the
Mm,
time, right? And while I was writing this book, I was struggling with what was going on in the country and what was going on in family. Um, and I've sometimes written a poem that struggling with something and even though I wrote the answer in the poem, I didn't realize it until years later, rereading the poem. I went, oh, like,
yep.
oh my God, I knew the answer all these years ago and I still didn't get it. I wrote it.
Right.
I still didn't
Right.
get it, but now I get it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because it's kind of like, there's poetry in scripture, and I think what you're talking about makes so much sense, because you could read something, and maybe we're just not ready for it when we first read it, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's a part of, we might have blinders on, or whatever the case may be, or whatever we're going through at that time kind of prevents us.
yeah,
And then later, I'm just reminded of, Jesus said, "Let those who have eyes see," and I feel like it's kind of like when the time is right, we'll see it in that, and I hear that in what you're saying about the poetry in there. So that's really neat.
yeah, that's exactly right. That's great.
Yeah. So I'm wondering too, because this is such a divided time. And, given what you were just talking about that, I'm wondering what kind of role poetry can play in the public discourse. Like, how do you see that it can be utilized in a very public way, as opposed to just a personal reading? How could it be something that can be utilized in a public way to either, and what do you think can be accomplished with it, or what kind of divides do you think can come down in that public way?
Oh, well, th this is a perfect setup for what I'm doing with the book. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
um, in performing readings from the book, rather than doing a more standard kind of poetry reading where I read the poems to the audience and maybe there's a Q&A at the end, I'm doing what I call and response readings. So I read some of the poems that are about reaching across the political divide and seeing each other's humanity, seeing each other's soul. And then I tell a couple of sample stories from my life about talking to someone and having a good conversation across the divide. And then I invite the audience to share stories like that.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
yeah, yeah. And, I would love to think that, you know, beyond my doing this with audiences that other people could be doing this too. There could be readings with other poets reading their poems or other poets' poems and having this kind of call and response where you're just, you're not arguing about politics. You're just finding some common ground, finding, common humanity.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're so divided and there's, so much anger, and hate that I think we need to just get to a place where we can see each other's humanity again
Hmm.
and have some good conversations, find some things in common and build some trust, so that then maybe we can start to talk about policy issues, politics, and, I think, people are so sort of set in what they think politically and all, and so angry that we need to do this more soulful thing first.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reminding me of several things, but
Yeah.
one which I think is so very interesting. There's a book called Good Reasonable People. I think the author is Keith Payne, and just uh, people can Google the book. One of the things that he writes about in there, because he wrote this as his own search for understanding his own family, and how to. These are people he loves, cares about, but there's this divide has created a chasm, and who's trying to figure out why, and what to do about it, that type of thing. And he makes a statement in the book that, and maybe this percentage is high, I think, honestly. He says that maybe 15% of the population thinks ideologically. And what he means by that is that thinking ideologically is a well thought out, consistent way of approaching policies across issues, right? And so most people are not thinking ideologically; they're thinking about whatever is they're being presented with in that moment, which is no different than I think how people approach like religion, or he uses baseball.
Yeah.
There's a few people that know everything about baseball, and then there's everyone else who are familiar with the sport.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering about, what I hear and what you're talking about, that is it's moving the conversation away from an ideological conversation, which people generally aren't even thinking that way anyway. And I really appreciate when you're using the term, seeing the humanity of others, which is a huge thing for me. Is instead of this abstract issue, whatever the issue is, now it's enfleshed.
Yeah.
That there's people, there's names. It's messy. It's not, you can't get a nice tweet or an X or whatever they're calling it now to have an answer for something in that. So yeah, I really appreciate what you're talking about that.
Yeah, can I tell a really
Yeah.
short little story? So this is one of the stories I tell when I do these call and response reading to kind of give people an example. And what you said just made me think of it. So I was standing in line one day at a store waiting to pay for my purchase, and all of a sudden the man next to me tried to pick a political argument.
Oh.
So, I happened to notice what he was holding, and it looked like a gift for a little girl. So I said,
Mm.
by any chance, is that a gift for your granddaughter? And he said, yeah. And I said, oh, how old is she? And he told me, and I said, oh, my granddaughter's, 7. And we had this great conversation about how much we
Yep.
loved our granddaughters. We never had
Yep.
the fight, you
Yep.
know?
Beautiful. Absolutely, right? And
Yeah.
I think some of it too is politics ends up taking on a form of identity, right? It helps people to define what their identity is because right, you're attached to something, you're part of something larger. There's a language that usually goes with that. There's a belief system, whether people know the belief system or not, they know they're part of something else, right? And that sense of belonging is a huge human need in that. And what I hear in your story and what I think is so beautiful about that is you shifted it from a belonging of something small comparatively to something much larger.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, Democrats, Republicans, and anybody else have grandchildren. Not that everyone has grandchildren, but enough. Like it's not a partisan thing.
Yeah.
It's humanity has
Yeah.
that, and so you were able to shift that to the larger sense of belonging in that. So that's just yeah, I love that story. That's wonderful. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of these poems and
Okay.
get into them. So the first one is aptly called nonpartisan, uh, which I'm going to have you read if that's all right.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, do you want to read it first, or do you want to give us a little bit of setup or anything about why the title and all of that, or what would you like to do?
I'll tell the story of the poem.
Okay.
I wrote this based on something that actually happened to me. Um, I was at someone else's poetry reading, and it was after the reading, and I saw someone kind of across the room, and he was just kind of looking, and I felt like I saw his soul. I mean, it was
Wow.
just a staggering kind of moment, and if you have that happen to you, you don't forget that. And
Yeah.
I don't belong to a religion, right? But
Hmm.
that is what that felt like. And I never thought I would be able to write a poem about that because like the possibilities for cliche and sentimentality are legion.
Sure. Right. Right.
But I finally, one day I was thinking about it and I found a way in. And so, I wrote the poem inspired by this one event in person, but for me, it applies much larger. Like I wanted it to be for everybody, hence nonpartisan, right? Like
Hmm.
doesn't matter what per person's politics are. If you're paying attention, you can see people's souls
Yeah.
regardless. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's really powerful. I just want to take that in for a minute of,
yeah.
like to really see the fullness of a person is I would call that some kind of a spiritual experience, but
I would too.
yeah, that's wow. Yeah, that's really great. Okay. Well, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and read it.
Yeah. Nonpartisan. If I told you I saw your soul, would you judge me inappropriate or disbelieve me? If you asked for a description, would I admit you glowed golden as these late northern afternoons, whose slanted autumn light makes green fire of a backlit tree's shimmering leaves and balances me perfectly on the tightrope between yearning and content, as if I finally understood what beauty meant to tell me?
Wow. There's there's so many images that you are painting with this, with literally images, but also with colors in that. And I'm just wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the intentionality of that.
Yeah, I think, in looking to describe, the ineffable, the impossible, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you begin to describe somebody's
Right.
soul or what it was like to see somebody's soul? I think, um, it might have been that I wrote this on a day that was like this, right? But
Mm,
just like it felt like seeing a light in
yeah.
someone or around someone, like an aura or something. So, in terms of metaphor, remember I was talking earlier before about metaphor and like how that's kind of a shortcut maybe to wisdom and truth and beauty. Um, and so I think light was the thing that seemed the most soul-like to me. And I can't say that I was, in writing the poem, I wasn't like taking this apart like I'm talking about it now. It just was
Sure.
more of an
Right.
instinctual thing. Like I just went there, like I got the image in my mind and like, that's a way in. I can do this.
Right.
Try to describe what that was like. Um,
So how would you say that with this poem, are you, I don't even know if I have the right words to get this together. So
yeah.
so we're just going to see how this goes. But the term nonpartisan,
Yeah.
right? Depending on who you talk to, has different meanings. And you're right, and this happens so much in our political and religious landscape and whatnot, where so often we're all speaking English, or a lot of people are speaking English, but we're not all speaking the same language. Which, especially for authors, for poets, becomes a real, I think, a challenge and an opportunity. And so you're using this term nonpartisan, and yet like there's no discussion about politics in this, and so I'm just wondering, maybe you can talk about this in the sense of it's this, you turning the term into something else.
Yeah. It's sort of like, I think kind of the point I'm making with that title is like, this doesn't have anything to do with political party, right? It
Right.
transcends political party. It doesn't care about political party. It applies to any or no political party. Like presumably everybody has a soul, no matter what
Right.
their party is or whether they don't have a party.
Right.
Um, and I've actually been nonpartisan since I was 18 years old and voted for the first time.
Okay. Yeah.
I was proudly nonpartisan, and have remained that way. Um, so, for me, it has a personal meaning that way too, and that, I don't agree entirely with either party, and I prefer to think for myself.
There you go, right? Yeah. I'm right there with you. I actually have a long background in politics, and as a result of that, I have been registered nonpartisan since 2006, with one
Oh.
exception of re-registering in a party so that I could vote in a primary in 2016. And as soon as I did, I re-registered as nonpartisan again because I felt dirty. Um,
I did that once briefly too because I
uh-huh.
lived in a state that
Yep.
required you
Yep.
to belong to a party if you wanted to vote in the primary.
Yep, yep. That's certainly the case here in Pennsylvania. You're
Yeah.
required to, and so I was like, okay, well, but ever since then, I have been registered nonpartisan. So I certainly appreciate that. When you think about this poem, and you think about the current political climate, what do you hope that this poem can reach to people who see themselves in a partisan way?
Well, I hope it can, it can cut straight past the business of politics. So like you were talking about before, something much larger that we share, right? Like,
Yeah.
we share having souls,
Yeah.
no matter what. Um, and, so hopefully like in focusing on that, like the politics just don't matter. Um, like this is so much more important and so much more universal, right? Um, Soul doesn't care about politics, I don't think. Um,
Or at the very least, there's something more that has deeper meaning than the politics, right? I mean,
yes, yes.
because politics matters.
Well,
However,
yes.
however, I think what happens is we turn it into this like all-consuming thing, as if it is the thing of the ultimate importance, and that's where we get into trouble,
Yeah.
because we've turned away from, well, why does any of this exist at all? Like there's got to be something more than just winning an argument or any of that type of stuff. So, and yeah. All right. So before we continue, I'm going to break in with my little I don't know. It's not an ad since no one's paying for it. So uh, I would take a brief moment of pause to tell a few things that are close to my heart that I talk about, where faith meets action. Really, first is Christ Lutheran Church here in Harrisburg. It's where I serve as the pastor, and it's certainly way more than a congregation. It's a healing community where we host 3 free health clinics that have welcomed over 100,000 visits since 2018. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot of healing. It's a whole lot of care for folks. If you want to be part of something beautiful, you want to learn more, hey, if you're in the area, you can take a tour. You can schedule that. You can go to christharrisburg.org. And given all the things that are going on right now, we certainly could use some support as well. So if that's you're inclined to do that, then please consider that. Second is the Memorial Blanket Project. Every year, people from across the country, and we've even had folks from different parts of the world who make blankets for strangers. We turn that into a large art installation, draws attention to homelessness, and then we give the blankets away at the end of the night. It happens on December 21st, which is Homeless Remembrance Night. And this year we're going to be doing that in Denver, Colorado. I can't believe it's the 5th year of doing this. You can learn more at memorialblanket.org. And finally, if you're wrestling with the heartbreak of gun violence, we're talking about literature, and you can check out American Roulette. I'm one of the authors of that. It's a novel that sparks honest conversations about a really tough topic, and it does not offer any answers at all. Certainly not easy answers. The point is to focus on the humanity that has been missing in the conversation around gun violence. So you can find that wherever you find good books, or go. I always like to promote your local bookstore as well. They always need support as well. All right, with that, we can go back to the show. So thanks for that little interlude. So I want to turn now to another poem, and I hope I say this name right. I had to look this up. The State of the Union, Abed. Is that correct?
Obad.
Abad. There you go. Okay, sorry about that. See, I
That's
knew,
okay.
like I knew I was going to mess that up. Do you want to give a little background on this one setup?
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, Obad, for listeners who don't know, is a poem or a song in honor of the morning or set in the morning. And this poem I wrote during Trump's first turn, right after his first State of the Union speech. And I happened to be driving along a country road in the dark right before dawn. And it was just kind of magical, because for the people that were up, the houses were lit up.
Right.
You could see inside and they couldn't see you. And it was just sort of magical. And so that was what inspired the poem.
Okay, great. If you could read it, that would be great.
Yeah. State of the Union Obad. Moving through dawn's ethereal twilight gray, as darkness leaches from valley landscape, passing gold-lit rooms like staged plays, wombs from which a day's labor is born, brief havens for waking. One man with his back to me, though he doesn't know it, bent like a lover to his task, with faith in walls that may not be all he needs to survive catastrophe. One man with his hand cupped so tenderly around a mug, I want to hug him. Maybe contemplating ways to face the day with faith and compassion and adversity, each luminous, breakable neighbor, sipping hot coffee or eating a donut, holy in the moments duty soon will co-op, but none more or less divine than any other.
Wow. There's there's a lot of richness in that poem. I can't help but notice, like, so, there, again, there's this term, the State of the Union, which has there's this sense about it, right? I mean, we have the official State of the Union address that happens, usually the end of January. It's got all the pomp and circumstance. If people have ever seen it on television, they know that, it takes like 30 minutes for the president of the United States to walk down the aisle and have to shake hands with everyone. And, there's the formality and all this type of stuff. And then they get up there and they do the speech, and every two lines, there's, interruption and all that type of stuff. And then there's the description that you have, which again, like I use the term enfleshment. You've kind of taken all that term and turned it into something else. And I'm just wondering why that title for this poem.
In a way, it's, kind of a response, right, to that State of the Union speech, which, as I remember, was rather divisive and
Hmm.
bleak.
Yeah,
And this was sort of me saying, okay, this is the state of my union.
there you
Here
go.
I am, with my country neighbors on both sides of the political divide, and this is the state I'm feeling, you know.
Mm.
I'm feeling love for these people, whatever their political opinions are.
Yeah, so then we have that nice contrast, right? And yet kind of both there at the same time. So what I hear in what you're saying is it's not um, what's the best way to put it? Not a rejection or an ignoring or anything else. It's there because that's part of the reality, and kind of almost maybe a focus of here's my world in that. So yeah, that's really interesting. Um, there's certainly a lot of tenderness, and I can hear some lament in this as well. Um, Survival amidst political division, all that type of stuff. Where do you feel like this is kind of trying to bridge that tension between the personal and the national with all that in there together?
Yeah, yeah, the phrase that I have here, with faith and walls,
Yeah,
that may not be all he needs to survive catastrophe. And that's a kind of a nod to that. At that time, there was this whole business about building the wall and making
right,
Mexico pay for it. And
right.
on both sides of that, there was a very strong feeling about having walls or not having walls. So, that line is kind of a nod to that. But then, the larger point is this feeling, this love and compassion for this person and all these other people that I'm driving by, in their intimate little routines in the morning, making their coffee, having their coffee, eating their donut, whatever. Back to that sort of some of the larger things we share, like, whatever your politics are, most of us are probably getting up in the morning and having coffee or tea and, some kind of breakfast.
Yeah, right. And then
And
before getting into as you have towards the end there, holy in the moments, duty soon will co-opt,
yeah.
right? All before having to get into the day and have to deal with all the stuff that's going to happen in there. Um, do you feel like this is kind of in a almost like in a prophetic tradition of of what you're writing in this, or I don't know, another term would be truth telling type of um,
Def oh, sorry. Definitely truth telling. I hope prophetic.
uh-huh.
I mean, I do think that a lot of people on both sides politically are feeling the way I have been feeling for quite a while now. Like, you know, for as much anger and rage and hate as there has been, I think a lot of people are feeling exhausted by it and just wanting to like,
Yeah.
can we just get along and can we just like go back to the time before
Sure.
we all had to like, if not think this or feel this, hear about it every day. And,
Yeah.
just it's exhausting, all the division. And I actually had a really wonderful experience of family. So in my extended family, we have some people that are, Trump supporters.
Hmm.
Um, we've got liberals, independents, MAGA diehards, and hold your nose Trump voters in the
Uh-huh.
family. And um, my husband became estranged from his
Mm.
sister-in-law and brother over politics in 2015, and we're
Wow.
estranged for 9 years until that time came when family members were going to need us to like
Yeah.
be working together to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, at that point they made up and we've been working in concert, to do caretaking and it's been wonderfully healing. Um, and, I'm sure we still don't agree on politics, but we agree 100% on the care issues. And I was invited to a, uh, a wedding shower for just the girls,
Uh-huh. Yep.
I'm in a room with 20 women and I'm going to guess if I wasn't the only person where I was politically, there were probably only a couple of us.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but everyone, they were asking, "How are you? What are you doing?" And
Yeah.
it was right before my book came out, so I was talking about that, and they were all excited about it. They all said, "Oh my God, it's great that you're doing this. It's wonderful. We need this."
Yeah.
And I have found that in talking to people on both sides of the political divide.
Yeah.
I get 99.9% the same answer from everyone. It's wonderful that you're doing this. I'm exhausted by all the division.
Yeah.
We need someone to be doing this. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's a pretty common assessment, honestly.
yeah,
We were talking earlier about the notion that there's a small percentage of people who think ideologically, which means that the vast majority don't. And so I think that vast majority is exhausted,
yeah,
right? And not sure what to do. No, I don't think anybody has the answers for this.
yeah,
And I don't know that we're looking for answers are probably not even right. Maybe that's part of the problem is the search for answers as if, well, that's going to give us, this clarifying moment or whatever, and then everybody's going to get it. And it's like we're locked in our head. We need to be more into what's going on in the heart,
yes,
right? That type of thing. So I got to ask this. So this poem is set in the morning. And I can't help but think about this. Just kind of came on me, or it dawned on me. No pun intended.
and
Uh,
yet,
yeah, I know, right? But I'm remembering Benjamin Franklin's famous words at when they were working on, I think, the Constitution or one of the founding documents. And they're looking at a painting or it's a chair. I don't remember the whole story, right? But there's a sun there. And the question was, is it rising or setting? And he says, we'll see. Because he was using that as an analogy for the country in the
yeah,
midst of this process of again, I don't remember what they were drafting something. Um, and seeing it as this opportunity, but also this kind of danger at the same time of, is the sun rising to opportunity or is it setting? So I'm wondering given that you're writing this, the setting of this is for the morning. Is it that the morning is shedding light? Is it a wake up call? Is it what is it about the morning that's so important for this?
a wake-up call.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the whole book in some sense is an exhortation,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm hoping to inspire people to reach across the divide and to see across the divide and hear across the divide. And And with the call and response readings, I'm doing that very deliberately. Um, and I talk about, at these readings and in general, I mean, when I go about my day, when I'm at the grocery store or the doctor's or the auto mechanic, I'm making an effort to talk to people and
Yeah.
hopefully people that are not necessarily where I am politically and have good conversations. And,
Yeah.
I would exhort people to be doing this in their lives. I think it makes a difference. If all of us did this once a week,
Mm.
it was someone on the other side politically, I think it would make a big difference. So yeah, definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah. This is also, I think, one of those things where when we expose ourselves to those type of situations, it also gives us a sense of some humility, right? Because
Yes.
now you got to be really intentional about those interactions, right? You're going in not to show somebody is wrong. You're going in not to be right. You're going in to see someone's humanity and to see how you're more similar than you are different. And that takes some humility. It takes a practice of recognizing the triggers in ourselves, right? Because it would be really easy to all of a sudden just somebody says something and they don't even oftentimes they don't even realize what's happening, right? We don't know what's going on inside of the other person to know what might be a trigger for something or whatever the case may be. It's reminding me of so today. It's Sunday. We had worship today, and the reading from today was from First Kings, which is the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures, and it was about Elijah, the great prophet, and he was running away from Jezebel and Ahab, which are the Jezebel's the queen of the northern kingdom of Israel. Ahab is the king. Not good people, violent, oppressive, all sorts of stuff. And Elijah had just had this. We'll call it a contest, although much more violent, with prophets from Baal, and he ends up killing them, right? And so then he's afraid because Jezebel's upset and is trying to kill him. And he has this moment where he's exhausted and he's afraid and he thinks he's alone. And it's this human moment. Here's this guy that's, man of God type of thing, and he's shown to be very human. And it's when it's gotten away from being right and all this type of stuff, you can actually see his humanity. And what happened when we were having, we do an adult Bible conversation before worship with some folks. And I will tell you the richness of what people were sharing was incredible because we took a view at this from the sense of the humanity of Elijah and how we could see ourselves in that being exhausted, of being afraid, of being, all of the things that are going on in the story and how we have been swept up in cycles of violence and all this type of stuff. It's that's reminding me kind of all of the things that you're talking about with this poem of especially the imagery that you have in here of you know where is it especially what is it the his hand cupped so tenderly around a mug, right? I don't drink coffee, but yet I can still picture that. There's a connection there, there's a humanity in that, and that's really powerful in that. So I just want to
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. um So, do you want to highlight another poem? We have time to highlight one more, and then I think we might have a couple of closing questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to read one called Dear Attila.
Okay.
So I wrote this after an experience I had talking to someone waiting at the gate for our flight at an airport. And we just, he thought he didn't want to talk politics with me because he assumed I was on the other side. And we ended up having a really good conversation. Dear Attila, hello, fellow snowbird. with your second home in Florida, in the city next to my in-laws to be. Thank you for the pre-flight commiseration over northern winters, the mutual appreciation of a southern break, for shared love of certain books and movies. Thank you for favoring me with your dimples in good cheer, for your reluctance to hurt with political dueling, what you assume must be my liberal feelings as a Vermonter. Thank you for dipping your toes in anyway, for laving them in perfectly civil debate scaling walls, for the concession that both sides have been known to lie, for your self-deprecating humor in referring to yourself as being to the right of Attila the Hun, but disarming in attempting to conquer with charm instead of your namesake's force, for being so courteous as to renew my faith in the humanity of those with whom I disagree politically.
Mm, that's beautiful. I really appreciate right in there. 'Cause I hadn't read that one yet. So I was like, Attila, that's got to be like Attila the Hun reference. So it's right in there. Yep, right in there. And it's funny because I think we've all heard this phrase before. Oh, I'm to the right of Attila the Hun, which also kind of like which is humorous because like how do we know what Attila the Hun where like for someone from a long time ago, many centuries ago, in a foreign context and culture that Republican and Democrat did not exist. Like how do we know what he was like? Anyway, I don't know where that phrase came from, but it's out there in that. But I really appreciate so much of what you're saying in there about uh, thank you. You're saying thank you over and over again. And it's not thank you for just agreeing with me. It's thank you for being who you are and being open about that. This kind of sharing, this vulnerability of who you are, this stranger to be vulnerable. And so I don't know if you want to. Is that kind of what struck you with that conversation?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure if we had tried to just have a straight up political conversation, without the nonpartisan part, the soul part, it might not have gone well. But he was charming. He was adorable. And we might have started out thinking, oh, they're on the other side, and therefore they're this, they're that. But you know, we found things in common, and we had this really nice conversation. And we didn't have the argument. We talked a little about politics. I was
Yeah,
very
sure.
careful, and like you know what you said about humility is really important, and I would add curiosity, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I ask a lot of questions and I listen, and I do more of that than talking usually in these conversations. Um, it was just kind of wonderful, and I think he appreciated it too. And it's funny, we were on this flight together, and then we had a second flight to get all the way to Florida, and on the second flight, I got on the plane, and he was on that one too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so he's halfway down the plane, sitting already. And so I yelled, I said, "Hey, Attila!" And I waved at him.
I love that.
Like he waved and he grinned. And we'd had this really nice connection, despite the politics. This soul connection, this heart connection. It was really great.
You,
Um,
you both saw the humanity in one another,
yeah.
right? I mean, and that's because there's going to be differences. I think this is one of the things, and maybe this is a modern challenge that we have that this is I'll try and keep this really concise because I know we're running out of time. But I think like we're inundated with things that are designed specifically for us. So our entertainment is no longer, you have three networks to choose from, and then that's it, right? And the radio had so many stations, and there were some blockbusters that everybody went and saw. Now everything is tailored to an individual, and you can get what you want and only be exposed to what you want. And at no time in human history has this ever been the case, except for now, that we have the ability to exclude and build walls around ourselves, metaphorically, to keep out anything that we don't like, and to expect. This is the part where it gets dangerous. To expect that that's normal, and that that's the way things are, is that we only have to deal with things that we like, or that we identify with, as opposed to the reality of the world is there's far more diversity of thought, of belief, of you name it, of everything else, and then we have to figure out how to deal with it, not push it away and avoid it. And what I really appreciate about this poem is it doesn't, especially again, the thank you is really kind of embracing that that reality in there. That's what I hear so much in what you're talking about, and especially in that poem.
Yeah, he got past his hesitation in talking to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I think he was glad, and I was glad. And I really appreciated the effort and the willingness.
A lot of this, and I'm sure this is the case for so many of the other poems that I haven't gotten to yet. But what I hear so much, we've been talking about the idea of humility and humanity, but really, if there's a term, is empathy, right? And that's the key. It's something that seems to be there's a challenge in our society with empathy. But we even have a segment of those that would claim Christianity that are saying that empathy is a sin, uh, which is mind-boggling to me. As a Christian pastor, I don't even know how to make that claim. Uh, if Jesus wasn't empathetic, I don't know who was. And so I'm wondering about, especially this book of poetry, you know, looking at connection and belonging and humanity and all of that type of stuff. What what do you see as the role of empathy, maybe in your poetry, and how it can actually break down those kind of barriers?
Yeah, I think that's sort of, empathy is one of the primary tools of the trade for a poet. You that's
Yeah.
kind of what we do. Um, and I would say I think compassion's as important as empathy. Um,
Hmm.
but in that trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel how it feels. I mean, we're doing that constantly as poets, and hopefully these poems do some of that with, like Dear Attila, right? Like
Right.
seeing the divinity in somebody else,
Yeah.
regardless of their politics, who cares,
Right. Right.
Um, so, I hope to be able to do that. And, for a larger goal, talking about Whitman, I actually didn't find this out about Whitman until after the book was already, in the process of being published. I found it out like 2 weeks before the book was available in stores. I happened to watch the Great American Experience,
Hmm.
about Whitman, which was a documentary about him,
Yeah.
and discovered that he had written Leaves of Grass to try to stop the Civil War.
Mm.
And, I wrote this for sort of like my ambition wasn't so grand because,
Yeah. Sure.
but with a similar kind of impulse,
Yeah.
like I was distressed by what was going on and wanting to do something to, to
Yeah.
bridge. And yet, I had the title poem is in conversation with Whitman. So it was just so perfect. I kind of couldn't believe it. Like, um,
Right.
and, and Whitman is like, trying to have empathy for everybody, we, right? Um, and it's really kind of in the title, I think, the empathy,
Yeah.
like I hope to be seeing everybody, seeing past the politics to the soul.
Yeah.
And
So, so when people read this
yeah.
and they walk away, do you have a hope for what they're feeling, or do you have a hope for what they do next, or what's your hope for what the takeaway is, based on what when they're reading your poetry?
Um, I hope that maybe they'll find some comfort, and some inspiration, like to maybe try just one reaching across the divide.
Mm.
Um, in from after one of the call and response readings I gave, someone who attended the reading wrote to me and said that she had gone out the next day after the reading and tried it. Like
Oh,
she went
okay.
to, buy
Yeah.
manure from the farmer she gets manure from, and she dove in and tried the conversation and had a good conversation. So,
Wow.
like, if nothing else good happens from this book, I'm thrilled about that.
Right, right. Oh yeah,
Like,
that's awesome. Wow, that's
yeah.
really just that's really inspirational. Because again, like as an author, when we wrote American Roulette to have people have conversation around gun violence, and so then when you hear people do that, it's like, wow, okay, yeah, this is exactly why I wrote this.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate that. All right, so in our closing minutes, where can people find the book? Where can they purchase it? Where can they maybe? Well, let's start with that. Where can people find the book?
Anywhere books are sold in the country.
There we go. And
Yeah.
and and again,
And, or,
it's we. I have a copy. I have. Thank you, April, for sending me this. We, April Ossmann, Ossmann. It's right there, so you can see the book cover. I'm colorblind, but I assume this is red, correct?
yes,
Okay,
red,
great.
white, and blue.
There we go. And these are these chains then that
Yeah,
are and
yeah, of red and blue hands.
okay.
Yeah, my publisher, Red Hen Press, has a fabulous book designer, and he
Oh,
came up
nice.
with this himself, you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
as reflective of the themes of the book.
Wonderful. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really awesome. I
Yeah.
would have gone a little bit further into that. Anyway, and if people are interested in reaching out, maybe they're having an interest in maybe they want to do like some kind of what you're talking about, a public reading, and they're wondering, well, how do I do this? What's the best way to do this? Can they contact you? How would they do that? Or is there some kind of instruction or something that you share with people? What would be the best way for people to do that?
I'd be happy to share. If people go to my website, aprilossmann.com, my email and my phone number are at the bottom of every page.
Wonderful. And April, last minute, is there anything else that you want to add in before we leave for today?
Yeah, I guess I would just say one thing. You'd said maybe there wasn't an answer, and I would say that like all the great mystics, right? Isn't love the answer?
Yeah, well, right. And that easier said than done, obviously, right? That may be the answer, but I will tell you that's yeah, yeah, wow. That's very true and also complex at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Well, April, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I have really enjoyed the conversation. I've enjoyed the poetry. I think there's a lot of richness in what you're writing. Again, using metaphor and also the vulnerability that you have. These, you said, coming from your own personal experiences, oftentimes, for how you're feeling. I know for me when I write, when it really is coming from inside, then it's like, oh, that it turns out to be pretty good writing. It's authentic, it's real, it's raw, and so I just want to thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, folks, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in not too long from now. Take care.